Welcome to Art Ed Radio, the podcast for art teachers. This show is produced by the Art of Education University, and I'm your host, Tim Bogans. Hello, and welcome back to new regular episodes of Art Ed Radio. Thank you again for listening and supporting the Ask the Experts mini-series. We're really proud of that one, and we appreciate everybody listening, everybody sharing the episodes, and sharing your feedback about those episodes. We couldn't be happier with how everything went and how many people we had listening, so thank you again. Now, as we come back today, we are celebrating Poetry Month. April is National Poetry Month, and during this month, the AOEU writers have come through in a big way. There are articles on the site about concrete poetry, about ekphrastic poems, pairings of art and poetry, spontaneous ways to use poetry in the art room, and so many more ideas. And I will go ahead and link a few of my favorites in the show notes. And before the month is out, I wanted to sneak in one podcast episode so we can kind of join the party. Our old friend Kyle Wood is back on the show today. We have some catching up to do with him. I need an update, and I think everybody else wants an update on his Arts Madness tournament from last month. And we also have a lot to talk about when it comes to poetry and art, including the articles he wrote for the magazine. And I'm looking forward to discussing all of that. So let me bring him on now. Kyle Wood, welcome back to the show. How are you?
I am always happy to be here. Still a little bit surprised when anyone wants to hear. I think it's because I work in an elementary. So like the idea that someone would actually care about what I have to say is still hard to accept.
Okay, that's fair. But you know, like you have all of these podcast appearances. You have your own podcast, which wildly popular. I know you're now writing articles as well. So hopefully some of that will get through and let you know that you have at least a few valuable things to say. But we just talked to you, a couple months ago, right before March Madness / Arts Madness started. And I guess we owe the listeners an update. Can you talk about how everything went with Arts Madness this year?
It was wonderful, as always. Like it is so cool to see people like, taking part in this thing. And, I had somebody, because at one point I said, like, just if you're from out of the States, just let me know when you're filling out the prediction form, where are you coming from? Because it's cool to see, like, oh, I charted in Australia or whatever. And somebody's like, yeah, and by the way, I'm from Spain. And it's like, that's so cool. Like, this little thing has grown out of my classroom and it's gone so far. The final week of Arts Madness was a super busy week. It was like right around the time of deadlines and stuff like that. So I set everything to publish, and then like my web hosts, whatever, had an error. So the form didn't publish on Sunday night or Monday like it was supposed to. And then it was like, I got an email from somebody who's like, my middle schoolers are worried. Are you okay? And I was like, yes, it was just a hosting issue, but it was resolved by Tuesday. The final round was super cool. I have never had this. So I always set my form to, I've always said like voting stops at noon on Saturdays. So that was like my cutoff. Saturday morning, I went to check. The final round was tied between Hokusai and Van Gogh. And then by noon, Hokusai came out ahead by just 2 votes.
Oh my goodness.
Closest finish I've ever had. So
that's wildly dramatic.
It was very exciting for me, at least.
I love it. I love it. That is really cool. So thank you for the update. Appreciate that. I also wanted to ask you, as we mentioned, you're now part of the AOEU writing team. And I would love to know just kind of what kind of feedback you've received on your first few articles, social posts, other things that you're putting out there. What do you want people to check out, or what have been some of the reactions that you've gotten to things that you've put out there?
So far, it's been like overwhelmingly positive. I cannot believe how many people have checked out the reels on Mondrian or my clay article. I was so proud of that clay article. I was a little bit worried that my clay article, I may have like peaked early in this. Like I used like I think probably 90% of the tips and tricks that I've learned over my entire career in that one article. So if you're gonna check something out, check out my
there's nothing to follow up on there.
But yeah, seriously, I loved that article. I was so happy with the ideas that I was able to share and put out there. And hopefully it'll help some other people, because I know when I was starting off, I was just always, it's a pinch pot, it's a vase, it's a bowl, it's a cup, kind of a little wobbly, but it'll be fine. And so I found some ways that made that much more workable, and hopefully, and so far other people are finding that really helpful as well. Yeah, so
that's awesome. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And I was just going to say, one of the things I loved about writing, one of the things I love about the podcast now is just being able to share ideas out there. Sometimes I have good ideas, sometimes I don't, but I am able to at least, put them out there into the world, and hopefully they're helping people. Because I remember when I first started teaching, I had all sorts of ideas of what I might try and want to do, but didn't know how to do it. And I was always looking for resources. And now that I sort of can look back and kind of share what I've been through, some of these experiences that I've had, hopefully that can help people out who are in the situation that I was in once upon a time. And that's just a really good feeling to be able to put that out there.
Very much the same. And I mean, that's actually how I came to the Art of Ed. I mean, early in my career, I started 17 years ago. Am I now a veteran teacher? Can I?
Definitely. Okay. So Candido and I talked about this on the printmaking podcast.
Yeah. He said like 10 years to double digits.
I think we decided once you hit double digits. So 17 is definitely.
I still feel like in some ways I have the new teacher mindset, and I still go to the Art of Ed to look for ideas, but I vividly remember those early days, just like driving in and thinking, what am I going to do today? Because I'm out of ideas and I've got another month to go. And there were a lot of days that I pulled stuff from the Art of Ed blog at that point, before it was a university, because I'm that old. But it's very nice to feel like I can give something back to the site and the community I have taken so much from.
Yeah, that's cool. Like I said, that's a very good feeling. And I actually want to talk a little bit more about your articles in just a second. But before we dive into that, I wanted you to kind of share with people something that you shared with me. You hit me up with some additional information, really good information, by the way, after that Ask the Experts printmaking episode with Candido that we just mentioned. We had a little conversation about doing reduction prints, and I was hoping that you could share with everybody what you gave me about how you do reduction prints with elementary students. So can you just kind of talk through that process and share with everybody how you do reduction prints in the elementary art room?
Yeah, and I feel like I should credit a source, but it's something I ripped off so long ago. I don't know who I took it from, but
that's the worst feeling in the world. Like, you want to credit somebody, but you're like, oh, that was 14 years ago that I found that. So
I picked up this trick where, the standard styrofoam that you're printing with, I've always done that. Like, I've experimented with the different ways, color with the markers and do the wet thing and everything like that. But students always wanted to get like a good full color print, and it was hard to do with the markers. It would come out blurry. And someone showed me that you can basically do the standard, etch it with like a pencil or whatever, print it full one color, and then just cut it into a smaller stamp. So let's say I make a styrofoam stamp of a butterfly. I etch my butterfly. I would always tell students to etch a pattern in the negative space, so it creates a little visual interest there. And then after they print the full stamp, usually with a lighter color, like a yellow or something like that, then they cut out the butterfly, and that becomes its own stamp. Or maybe they cut out each wing separately, so they have a small collection of separate stamps that they then just print one layer on top of another. And I have successfully brought that down to first grade.
Wow.
I have gotten mixed results in kindergarten. And the one thing I can tell you does not work with kindergartners is trying to do all of the reduction steps in one class period.
Okay.
I don't know why I thought I would do that the week before spring break, but that's how I roll. I treat a 5-year-old like they're 35 and just assume that if I know how to do it, they can do it equally well. But with appropriate pacing and everything, like, I was stunned with how well my students first grade and up can do it extremely well.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I know it's tough for, all of our visual learners to kind of listen to those directions, but I feel like you explained it pretty well. So thank you for doing that. I think that's good. Okay, so like I said, though, I want to jump in to talk about your poetry articles. April is it National Poetry Month? Is that correct?
National Poetry Month, yeah.
Excellent. Okay, so this is publishing at the end of the month, but we are doing something for it. So you had a couple different articles on incorporating poetry into the art room. Would love to chat just quickly about both. You had an article about ekphrastic poetry, which was a big word that I had to look up. I am not ashamed to admit. But I was like,
shame,
once I did.
It's Greek. I mean, who knows that?
Right. But anyway, could you explain ekphrastic poetry to our listeners and just talk a little bit about your article or talk about how you're doing that type of poetry in the art room?
Absolutely. And, ekphrasis, I think, is one of those great words that is so typical of art speak, where it's like the biggest, most intimidating word to describe something simple. It's just description. Ekphrastic poetry is descriptive. That's all it really is. It has its ancient Greek roots and stuff, and it's a tradition that goes back to like the Iliad, as Homer is describing the scenes embossed on Achilles' shield. But it's a description, if in plain speak, there is a ton of ekphrastic poetry out there. I like Cezanne's Ports because it's, kind of school appropriate, where it's literally just a description of a Cezanne painting, where it's like, in the foreground, we see time and life swept in a race, and all of that sort of flowery language that, what I like about it as an example to show students is it helps us to put the feeling and that response into words, and that's really hard for a lot of people. Even something that kind of resonates with most people at like a really basic level almost immediately. I think of something like the scream. Right away, there's something jarring here, but a lot of students will even be hesitant to say, like, is this scary? Is this angry? Like, what is this? And ekphrastic poetry people have put it into words. And, in the article, I talked about a couple examples, and I'm going to be honest, poets are miserable people. So some of them get a little dark. Always do your research, read it first, because sometimes it's like, oh, this is a lovely poem about Van Gogh's Starry Night. And then it's like, oh, this person's talking about death,
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes you pull just a stanza of a poem. But there are some great works out there. I also like, and I feel like it's so relatable for students. There's a poem by Frank O'Hara that's Why I Am Not a Painter. And he talks about like visiting Michael Goldberg's studio and seeing a painting take shape and stuff like that, which again, it's just like this another peek into the creative process and how we put these things into words.
Mm-hmm.
And so in the article, I talked about that as a few examples, but then also ideas about how it could work in your classroom, like maybe, a poetic artist statement, because sometimes students see like write 500 words. That feels like a lot, but write a poem that doesn't even have to rhyme. I can maybe do that.
Now, that's much more accessible. Yeah, I like that. And I think, I'll just direct people to the article. There are a lot of good ideas in there. We'll link to it in the show notes, obviously, but that's definitely something that I think is worth exploring. And you also published an article about concrete poems, which I really liked. I thought that was fun. I thought those are kind of creative. So can you talk us through those as well and just kind of share what they are, how you're using those in your classroom?
So concrete poems, it's funny, ekphrasis, I did not have to look up. Concrete poems, I did have to look up when I first heard about it.
That is ironic, to be honest.
Like, it was one of those things I started doing with my librarian. I don't remember how many years ago, maybe 5 years ago, something like that. He brought it to me. And like poetry was not really my background. So that was a new term for me. Concrete poems. What is that? And concrete, it is thinking very concretely about these poems and arranging the words to form an image that sort of brings out the meaning of the poem. So it's taking that abstract, flowery language and making it concrete, turning it into a shape, a silhouette, something that gives us something to connect to. And I was doing that with my students, like I said, co-teaching with my librarian a few years ago. He pulled out some books. There's a book of concrete poems called Wet Cement or something like that. That's absolutely beautiful. And a dazzling display of dogs, lovely, vivid illustrations. But we looked at those references and then we would write concrete poems with the students. One of the things I realized, though, in the process was it's sort of engaging those students who maybe some of them feel more comfortable writing than they do drawing, or the other way around. And this way, you get different entry points for students to feel like they've got at least some skills necessary to succeed in the project. And I thought that was really good. It helped to bring in a few more students to it. One of the other things that I learned about as I was researching for the article is how it can help. And this seems so obvious in hindsight, but I need to be told everything.
Some of us do. That's okay. That's okay.
It can be really helpful and powerful for English learners because they're starting to see. They're starting to like grapple with more complex language. They're playing with language in a way, but again, it still has that concrete application, the very literal shape and everything that's going along with it. So words and image together is very helpful for people to make some meaning and make connections.
Yeah, that's really cool. And yeah, it can be powerful. That's really interesting. Can you give us maybe just one or two examples, just concrete poems that you've seen your kids create or anybody else create, I guess, that are really good, really interesting? Just kind of illustrate what you're talking about here.
Okay, so for the article, I had to take pictures and stuff to go along with it. And so the picture in the article is of an ice cream cone. And I have to confess, I kind of ripped it off of a 9-year-old. It was one that, like, I didn't literally steal it from a 9-year-old, but it was one that, like, I saw the first time I was doing concrete poems with students, and this kid came up with this brilliant, just formed the words ice cream cone into an ice cream cone, and then the poem just was like melting like drips from the ice cream cone and forming a puddle at the base, and it was all about, like, drip drip drip, my ice cream melts on a hot day, but, like, I wouldn't enjoy it if it were a cold day, so I'm just stuck with my drippy melty delight, or something like that. I forget the actual words, but it was one of those ones that was just like, you're not even at double digits yet, and you're writing this more brilliantly than anything I've written in my 40 years. And so, yeah, that was a humbling but inspiring moment that I recreated.
Yeah, that's really cool. I'm very curious about that. So I need to see the example. I need to go back and look at that again, because I did not pay close enough attention when I saw that article the first time. So, and I guess one last thing for you before I let you go, before we're done talking about our poetry here. I would love to know any ideas you have about kind of extending concrete poem ideas, like taking those further, because I think there's probably some examples of where we can go if we lean a little more into the artistry side rather than the writing side, and I just love to know any thoughts you have, any ideas you have on extending those, or making kids do a little bit more, pushing them a little bit further with those ideas.
Yeah. So the obvious connection would be calligraphy. I mean, those students who really like poetry and writing and text and image and stuff, calligraphy is a natural extension of that. But then there's something, and this is a term that was also new to me at one point. I learned there's a Chicago-based artist, Joe Mills, does this stuff. I thought, like, he had coined a phrase or something, calligrams. It's like calligraphy with gram in there to, like, form an image. I guess it's a tradition that dates back to, like, Apollinaire. Wow. Again, this is one of those things I discovered as I was doing some research, but I'm sure everyone else is like, yeah, of course, everybody knows this, but, like, it was new to me. So
I definitely did not.
So with Joe Mills's artwork, what first grabbed my attention that I showed to students and they absolutely loved was, like, he made Chicago's skyline out of text. So, like, it's technically called the Willis Tower, but when he made it Sears Tower, and just
everybody knows it as the Sears Tower. Yeah.
And just stretching the letters so they form each building. So it's a very literal way of depicting every building in the city. But he did it, and it was absolutely beautiful, and it was mind-blowing to students, because from a it's like an impressionist painting. The far and near views of it are very different. And from a distance, it's just like, it's a cartoon skyline. What's the big deal? And then there are these, like, gasps as it's like, oh, it says the thing. It says the Hancock. It says the Bean, which is technically Cloudgate, but it's the Bean. And it was one of those things that, like, was really eye catching, and it has helped my students in so many ways to get so much better at a lot of skills where, like, you're doing something with graphic design, you're making a poster. Well, let's think about how we can make those words not your normal handwriting, but turn that into a part of the art and something artful in and of itself. So like every year, my local police department does a crime prevention calendar. And it's like, since I started showing Joe Mills and those calligrams and, talking about this stuff and how we manipulate text, like the words on the page are much better. Or like, I'm screen printing t-shirts right now, and the designs that they came up with and the way that the words form the images and stuff are much stronger. So I would say it's one of those things where it's like, it's a really good exercise to think about. And all you have to do is start with, what's the shape? What's the silhouette I want to create? And then how do you stretch the words? How do you stretch each letter to fill that space, instead of just fitting in that space, filling the space? And they're really surprised at how successful they can be relatively easily.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love all of that. I love just some of those after effects, some of the appreciation that you wouldn't think about that comes to their graphic design, their resulting work, and just seeing how that transfers. I didn't even think about how that would work, and I kind of love to hear that. So that's very cool. So, all right, well, Kyle, thank you for sharing your ideas, your research, teaching me all kinds of new words. I appreciate all of it. And yeah, always great to talk to you on here.
Oh, thank you very much.
All right. Thank you to Kyle for that entire discussion. Loved it. Loved where we went with a lot of that stuff. And I hope his explanations and his examples give you a better idea of what's possible and hopefully what you can do in your own art room. And before we go, there is one more article that I wanted to mention. It's one that Christina Brown wrote about using poetry to help your advanced kids focus a little bit more on the art making process. There's some really kind of cool ideas in there that I think are worth checking out. And like I said, we'll link to some of the articles if you're interested in reading those, finding some new ideas, and exploring just a little bit more. And honestly, I hope you do. There are a lot of ideas worth looking into, a lot of ideas worth trying out when it comes to the connection between art and poetry. And some of your students just might appreciate the opportunity to do a little bit more writing. Art Ed Radio is produced by the Art of Education University with audio engineering from Michael Crocker. Amanda will be back with me next week for the May mailbag episode. We have a lot of questions already, but we would love to hear more from you. Please send any questions you have to podcasts@theartofeducation.edu, or you can leave us a voice message at 515-209-2595. Thank you for listening, as always, and we will talk to you again next week.